This is, I'm sure we've all seen this before. It's The History by Tacitus. This is Tufts University. You can see right here it says tufts.edu. It says, I'm going to read it very quickly. This is something Tacitus, he's an early century historian, a classical historian. This is from the writings of Tacitus, complete works of Tacitus. He's an early century historian or a classical historian. He says, or he said, centuries and centuries ago, over 1,000 years ago, some say that the Jews were fugitives from the island of Crete, who settled on the nearest coast of Africa about the time when Saturn was driven from his throne by the power of Jupiter. Evidence of this is sought in the name. There is a famous mountain in Crete called Ida. The neighboring tribe, the Idae, came to be called Judei by a barbarous lengthening of the national name. Others assert that in the reign of Isis, the overflowing population of Egypt, led by Hieroselymus and Judas, discharged itself into the neighboring countries. Many again say that they, the Jews, were a race of Ethiopian origin, who in the time of King Cephas were driven by fear and hatred of their neighbors to seek a new dwelling place. Others described them as an Assyrian horde who, not having sufficient territory, took possession of part of Egypt and founded cities of their own in what is called the Hebrew country, lying on the borders of Syria. Others again assign a very distinguished origin to the Jews, alleging that they were the Ptolemy, a nation celebrated in the poems of Homer, who called the city which they founded Hierosolyma after their own name. So, one, Tacitus is saying that, people were claiming that the Jews were descendants of Ethiopians or were associated with Ethiopians. Before we move on, I want to show this real quick. This is the Met Museum, Africans in Ancient Greek Art. Tacitus was a Greek, I believe, either a Greek or a Roman. Right here, it says, all black Africans were known as Ethiopians to the ancient Greeks. As the 5th century BC historian Herodotus tells us, and their iconography was narrowly defined by Greek artists in the archaic and classical periods, black skin color being the primary identifying physical characteristic. So I want to show this just to demonstrate and show that just because the word Ethiopian is used, it's not saying literal Ethiopians, in every source. You have to look at the context, especially as to when the source was written. It's basically saying that back during this time period, Greeks and Romans, they used the term Ethiopian as an all-encompassing description for any black-skinned person. So even if you weren't a literal Ethiopian, they would call you an Ethiopian. That's just, how they did it back then.